Welcome to Traumedy. I'm your host, Nancy Norton. I'm a comedian, a former registered nurse, and this is not medical advice, nor a replacement for trauma therapy. Traumedy is teaching us how to take our pain and play with it, like comedians do naturally. We have an amazing guest who needs to be anonymous and has chosen to be anonymous because they're in an anonymous 12-step program. Our guest this week is George X, a friend of mine, longtime friend, and just somebody that makes me laugh more than almost anybody. So a lot of laughs this week and a lot of trauma. I mean, it is the ultimate Traumedy podcast episode. We are going to go into some, pretty intense stuff around alcoholism and depression and suicide attempts. So brace yourself for that. We are going to laugh along the way. Let me know if you have a topic you want to have covered, or if you want to be a guest on Traumedy. You can reach out to me, Nancy Norton, at my website, www.nancynnorton.tv, like television. And again, thanks for tuning in, and let's keep sharing and let's keep helping each other through this, what we call life. Welcome to Traumedy. My guest this week is George X. And I've already got my muses giggling over here because George may I call you George?
You can call me George. Yes.
You have always been one of those people that I swear I can just look in your eyes and start giggling.
Well, I have a funny looking face, so I'm not the first person to say that.
Oh, wow. Right off the bat, letting me know I'm not original.
No.
I'm always bracing myself too. There's a little bit of that because we probably met in the green room at Comedy Works.
I was trying to think, it's because when did you move to Denver?
1991.
91?
Yeah.
Okay,
Or 90 I moved, but then I don't think I showed up there till probably.
Okay, yeah, I knew I was thinking late 80s or early 90s, so yeah, that's probably the place.
Early 90s. And man, there were like zingers just fing, fing, the Rick and the Todd and the Troy and the Roger. You know what I'm talking about?
I totally know what you're talking about. And there's most of the time I enjoyed that kind of interplay, but I was thinking about this on the way over. Sometimes there were like no boundaries, and sometimes people would really get hurt, or there was just no boundaries, comics were, and it was kind of part of being in the club of like, no, you got to take it. If you're going to dish it out. But it was kind of funny because some of the people that were really good at dishing it out were not great at taking it.
I'm thinking of someone in particular whose synapses just fire so fast and zing, 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 zing. But man.
No, I remember one time
having
I had gone through a very hard breakup with somebody, and I got zinged by a friend. And I can't remember if I said before or after that, but I said, I'm really in pain right now. I mean, I know we're not supposed to talk about real shit, but I'm really hurting right now, and that really hurt my feelings. So please don't do that again. And he did it again. And I said, that's the last, we're not going to be friends if you do that again. I'm just telling you, because I'm not, in a place to receive that right now. And he got the message that time. Finally, he understood, but it was tough. And I knew there were other people that, good comics that were like, yeah, I don't really like hanging around that energy. And I always kind of enjoyed it because
you're good at it.
Well, and it could be funny and could be fun, but there were times when you went, oh, okay, maybe we went too far there,
Well, because at that time, I really feel like that was the milieu. And that's so cool that we're bringing that up right away, because I'm studying therapeutic humor. Mm-hmm. And so one of the big things is like, okay, is it affiliative? Does it lift, us up, or is it aggressive? And like somebody has got to be down for the other person to be up.
Yes.
And so, or sometimes it can be that sparring where if you're equals with somebody and you're just like zing, 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 and that's your code and you all agree on it, then that can be affiliative if you're just appreciating it.
Yes.
But like you said, when you have a real like wound, and we all do, and we hide it. And I think, man, I'm doing all this parts work. I don't know if you've heard of parts work. It's interfamily systems. Well, my inner teenager, her name is Virginia Vengeance. And
she's a punk rocker?
Oh yeah, she is. She thinks she is. Yeah. And but she protects my inner child, who's very tender and wounded. And if somebody hurts little Nancy, Virginia Vengeance is like, what did you just say? And depending on the person,
the avenging angel.
And I remember you saying this to me, and I know this is going to be maybe weird for you to say because you're in a recovery program.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yes.
for alcoholism. I hope, is that okay if I say that?
Well, you did now. Yes, you can say that. I'm pretty old. I'm not a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon or airline pilot, so I'm pretty open about it. Even though I'm Mr. X today, so
Mr. X,
just because of anonymity concerns, and I want to talk about more recovery related stuff. But please tell me.
You told me once, which I thought was interesting, because you were in recovery already, and you go, I love being around you when you drink because you're a lot of fun. I think because Virginia Vengeance,
Mm-hmm.
because my mother, I really struggle. Like, I need the stage, I need the microphone, I need to say this is comedy, it is my turn, and I get to say whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
But in the green room, even there, I think I was sort of, my little inner child was hiding behind the couch because I kind of knew I couldn't really hang with you guys.
It could be very daunting. Even seasoned comedians, it could be very daunting. People would
I could not. So I have to be honest.
People would say, I don't like that energy. I don't have to be on in the green room and do all that stuff.
I was like, these guys, I cannot.
Well, you are one of those fun people, and even as a sober guy, there are people that are fun and you just it's kind of amusing. Oh, that's cute. She's got a little buzz going and I can just tell and everything. And then there's those people, and usually later in the evening when they get that sense of personal space of a Lebanese bazaar, and they're like 3 inches. Yeah, do you know how, and you're okay.
Nothing against the Lebanese.
Yeah, nothing against the Lebanese or their bazaars. But, did you remember that time we took mushrooms like in 87? And you're like,
they're just,
I also remember the first 3 times you told that story tonight. So, and then that's the time when you go, okay, I got to go. That's why I drive. But, some people are fun.
And some people are fun. And I think, and my dad was one of those people, like that's when he would show up emotionally. And I joke about my dad being an alcoholic, and I don't know that he was, but he drank 2 drinks a night. And some people do. Some people just cannot. Like it's never the last one.
That was my MO. It's like when I start drinking, I cannot consistently and accurately predict what's going to happen.
Once it starts, it's on.
And I was a blackout drinker, and I always think of the great line from the great comedian Dave Attell, who talks about blackouts as being alcoholic time travel. Now I'm in a bar and now I'm in a McDonald's with 1 shoe on. How did that happen? And that was me. I did not moderate it very well, and it was, and I became kind of a buffoon too. And that's eventually is when I. You get the messages from the universe, and I was like, I don't want to be a buffoon anymore. I don't want to be somebody that's this big drunken oaf, falling down and stuff.
Yeah. So that was one of your big wake up calls. Was just looking in the mirror and going, I don't want this. Isn't who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not that person.
That's the thing that I regret. When we do the work of recovery and. Doing inventory and figuring out some of the crummy stuff you've done, and then being willing to go make amends to people is, it's a powerful process, but boy, it's hard when you have to, search the memory banks, such as they are, and really look at the things that you've done and the way you've harmed people. But it's also the path of liberation, and it's beautiful to be able to do that because most of the time we've spent running away from that stuff.
I know.
So the willingness to go do that is amazing, but boy, it's hard. And I've been thinking a lot. I just celebrated 30 years sober.
Oh, wow. I'm going to clap.
April 29th. And I've been thinking a lot about
30 years,
about
George.
my journey with, I'm in a 12-step program. So I'm, we talk about faith a lot and stuff, which I wanted no part of when I first came around. I thought I had that figured out when I was 12. There is no God.
Yeah,
I'm 12.
Had it all figured out.
See me if you have any other questions on life's mysteries, because I'm 12 and I know it all, So I've had a change of heart on that. But I've been thinking about grace a lot, and one of the definitions of grace is an unearned gift. And in the process of doing amends, and you may appreciate this because there was a guy named John Cooney. Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah. He passed away.
He passed away some time ago.
Yeah.
But we never got along, right? Like the first time I met him, he was the manager at McKelvey's Comedy Club, which was out on Hamden.
Yeah, in Denver.
In Denver. And I was like brand new, and I came in and I kind of didn't know where to go because that room was kind of, there was a bunch of new talent people and everything. he said, well, go over there or whatever. And I guess I was standing in the wrong place. And he came up and stuck his finger in my chest and said, I told you to go over there. And I said, get your finger off my fucking chest or we're going to have a problem. And that was our first interaction.
Yeah.
And then after that, we never got along. And over the years, and when I got sober, I had to realize, oh yeah, I did a lot of arrogant shit. You know, I always wanted to put it on him, and he's just a jerk. But it was like, no, I did some arrogant. I said arrogant things to people and unkind things, and you know, I mean, that was the information he had to work with. But I went to make amends to him because I had screwed up some shows where, you know, I'd shown up drunk and done some things that I owed amends for, and I went to make amends to him, and he was so gracious, and he said, I think you're a great comic. And, cause one of the things when you make amends, it's not just, I'm sorry. You know, when you make an amend, you say, here's what I did to harm you. And here's what I'd like to do to try to make it right. And is there anything else you need to tell me?
Yeah.
So you have to listen sometime.
Right.
And again, as a blackout drinker, sometimes people go, oh yeah. And then there's another thing. And you go, well, you know, but he said, what you can do is, stay sober and live your best life.
Oh, John. And
this was from a guy that, you know, we had a difficult relationship. And I thought, man, that's some grace. That's from a guy that, you know, we had we had butted heads forever. And when and part of it, I think, had to do with my willingness to go and try to repair some things. But it was, that was powerful. And not all of them went like that, but I would say there was another one or two of people I'd had difficult interactions with that said something to that effect.
That it sort of dissolved that power struggle.
Yeah.
And, you know, what I was seeing too, though, I feel like when somebody's in charge of their comedy club, but that doesn't give them the right to poke you in the chest and treat you.
Yeah.
I mean, so you stood up to him and you don't poke me in the chest. So I can see the two-way power struggle there because you aren't going to take that disrespect from, and you shouldn't have. But then again, you could have deferred more in some ways probably, but I like that you stood up to him poking him. I mean, personally, as somebody who, you know, I spent a lot of time in other meetings for codependency and adult children, and sometimes it's the best healing thing we do is sometimes to stand up for ourselves. And I mean, what I'm trying to, you know what I just figured out, I don't know if you've ever had this thought, but it hit me just yesterday that I spend so much time in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, like one of those four responses to trauma, that I'm rarely like able to say no, thank you. I feel like when I say no, it's like such a, like I'm either in fight mode or I don't say it. But anyway,
no, I hear
a lot
you.
of time we do spend a lot of time in reactive, reactivity, right?
Well, and I've learned that you've got to try to do everything with love in your heart, you know, and even if you're saying no and putting a boundary on something, there's a way to do that in a loving fashion.
And how's that going? How are you doing?
Oh, I hate everybody. I don't do it. I never do it. No, it's.
But I want to know, do you have a technique that, like, do you pause and take a breath? Because I'm very reactive.
Absolutely pause.
Okay, pause.
That's a line in the big book of AA is we pause when agitated or doubtful. And
okay.
If I learn nothing else from recovery, my life would go better if I learned to do that, because I'm totally reactive. I always say I'm like an amoeba, you know, poke one side and the other side's going to blob out.
Oh,
you know?
Okay.
And so
it's that immediate.
It's that reactive.
Yep.
I used to be, and now I've learned to try to have some perspective on it and try to pause when agitated or doubtful and just, you know, give it a second before we come back. And like I say, try to have some love in our heart and recognize where other people are coming from. One of the biggest things I've learned about, and we talk a lot about fear in recovery, you know, about fear as being this underlying, you know, fear underlies almost all anger.
Yep.
We realize that the anger is just a masking of the fear. And so one of the things I learned to do if I am in conflict with somebody is I ask myself, I wonder what I'm afraid of, and I wonder what that guy's afraid of.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that things magically resolve, but it puts me on the road to compassion rather than anger when I go, I wonder what he's afraid of.
And just being curious.
And just being curious of what's his perspective on it. And then that really helps. You know, sometimes you can find some understanding that you might not have found. And again, I don't always do that, but I try to be on that level. You know?
When you're operating at your best, and the variables haven't stacked. I'm looking at myself. I have an HOA meeting coming up. I'm preparing. I am getting psyched up. I have felt, but it's such a perfect metaphor for my family, right? To have this HOA, the head, the authority, and then I feel sort of, they aren't seeing me. They're not, they don't know my needs. They, whatever. And I have a bracelet I wear sometimes at Q-tip, quit taking it personally.
Oh, yes.
And that's one of my biggest faults, as taking things personally, because it usually isn't.
One of the 4 agreements. Have you ever read that?
Yeah,
book?
I did read that. I need to reread it.
And I think that's my hardest one, because I understand the concept of that, and I agree with it most of the time. But sometimes I go, no, when that guy called me an asshole, that felt personal.
Yeah.
He wasn't talking to somebody else. He was talking to me, so I find it difficult. But when you understand the idea of they're bringing all their past experience and all their past reactivity and all their shit.
Yeah, and they're protectors.
To that interaction, and you may have triggered something in them that you're not even aware of, and all this other variables. It's ultimately somewhat narcissistic to think it is about you.
Yes.
So when you can let go of that, but it's hard sometimes, because you butt heads and you go, wait a second, that felt like directed. And even just like what we were talking about, like, doing the dozens in the green room, and zinging people, because no, usually you do that most effectively when you do something very specific about what they're bummed out about.
Target my lazy crazy eye, or whatever your,
exactly.
whatever your issue that we know. We have a file. We know, and we know the file.
We'll poke that scab until it comes off, which is too bad.
Too bad.
Until we decide not to, I have an interesting relationship with comedy, because I did that for years.
Yeah.
And then at one point I had this epiphany while I was out on the road, and it was difficult because I was never like a great comic, and I would get pissed off at audiences, and I'd be, I'd be condescending. And
tell us, what does that mean, George?
That means talking down to.
I love when you.
But I would do that and shoot myself in the foot. I remember working with Jake Johansson, the great comedian, one time, and I was doing a bit that I just couldn't get to work, and then I get mad at the audience and comment on it, for like 5 minutes about how that didn't work. And he finally said, I think you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot there. I mean, at some point you just got to move on. I goes, I know. But I had this epiphany because I had set my life up. Part of the reason, like a lot of us go into comedy, is I got this hole inside of me, and I need this outside validation.
Yeah.
It's not even conscious that we're doing that, but that's what's going on. And then one time I was somewhere out on the road and having bad shows, and I went, I don't think it's the healthiest lifestyle to abdicate my sense of self-worth to a room full of strangers every night.
And drunk strangers at that.
Drunk strangers at that. So I was like, at some point I said, I may not be able to do this anymore. Or, I mean, I could do it and not, I have an independent sense of my own self-worth.
Yeah.
But at the time, that's kind of the way I'd set up the dynamic, I mean, I remember when we first started doing comedy, I mean, I thought I had found it. I was having trouble holding on to jobs. And when I first found comedy, it was like, this is it. I don't have to be anywhere till 7:30 at night. So that helps, with jobs. I was having trouble getting up. They give me free drinks. They applaud when I'm done. It's kind of like when I have sex with people, the same exact dynamic. Folks.
But can I say, I'm raising my hand.
Yes.
I need you to know something. And I think you know this. I'm not sure if you know it. But you have a reputation among the comedians as being one of the funniest people. Do you know that? Do you know that among the comedians, it's like, George is so funny, but there's something that happens that doesn't transfer to the stage.
Yes.
Does that ring true at all?
And I'm still chewing on, you are so funny, but it just doesn't translate to the stage.
It does translate.
No, but often it doesn't.
Hear me out. By comparison.
Yes.
To how funny you are in the green room. And then there was something that,
I would totally agree with that assessment. And I'll tell you, and it reminded me of one of my favorite backhand compliments I ever got. I was working with a guy named Richard Jenny. Do you remember him back in the day?
Yeah.
He was big back in the day. He had a show for a while, and he had a great special, and he was a brilliant comic. And I did 4 shows with him in Tucson. And the first 3, I just rocked. I had a great show and we hung out together and we had a great time and it was really fun. And that's one of those weeks where you feel like I'm really a pro comic, you know. And the fourth show, they just came to see him and it was really bad. And after the show, he said to me, you know, I don't think I've ever seen anybody as good as you have that bad a show. It was funny because I could appreciate that because that's when you know you're in the club when they'll even say that to you. If they didn't like you, they would never even say that. Years ago, our friend Mike Long, when I was pretty new, I had a crummy show and he comes up afterwards and goes, man, you couldn't buy a laugh out there, you know? And I had to laugh because I went, oh, that means I'm in the club now because if they don't like you, nobody says anything.
No, they say nice shirt, right?
Yeah, well, I've had that too.
But you know what I think too? I actually do think if you had a room full of other, because I feel like you're a comic, and if you had a room full of comedians, I think that's your audience. You have this very cerebral, sarcastic wit that is
right.
And I just feel like there's a loneliness when you're up there and you've got these like gems and people don't get it. They literally don't get it or they don't appreciate like the layers of sarcasm that you're doing. And it's so lonely. And it feels like rejection when it's really just we don't get it. And then you start taking it personally, your little Q-tip moment.
Mm-hmm. You know, again, our perversity as comics. I remember a comic friend going, if you can't make them like you, make them hate you.
Oh,
you know, which is a kind of a crazy thing, but I have done that before. It's like, I don't want to be in the middle. I don't want to just be like that one guy. It's like, no, they're going to remember when they walk out of there, good, bad, or different, you know?
I think there's there's a power in that. Like there's a passion. There is a connection at least. So maybe, hey, I'm going to get a connection.
There is an old line that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference.
Yeah, man.
So that's exactly what you're talking about there of like, just not.
You don't exist.
You don't exist. Well, I love, there's a great line in the movie Casablanca, you know, and so it's Humphrey Bogart and this guy, Peter Lorre, who is this character actor.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got the letters of transit that they're trying to get. And Peter Lorre, he goes, you despise me, don't you, Rick? And Humphrey Bogart goes, I suppose if I gave you any thought at all, I would.
You know, and there's nothing.
I think about, and notice I can do the Peter Lorre impression, but not the Bogart. So sorry about that. But if you got your hopes up that you're going to hear a Bogart, I'm sorry, I squelched that. But I always love that line of like, yeah, if I gave you any thought at all, yeah, I would maybe despise you. But that's it's like, I don't even think about you, you know?
Man,
so, you know, well, I just wanted to talk about, you know, some of the things that I learned, about some of the stuff when I was in treatment many years ago.
So you went to treatment?
I went to treatment in 1989 at a place called Harmony up in Estes Park. And it's a beautiful place. If it's an old hunting lodge and if you have to go to treatment, I'm going to give them a plug here.
Yeah, give them a plug.
If you need to go. It's a wonderful place to go. And it's kind of a 12-step based program. They introduce you to a lot of stuff. But I got there. I was doing stand-up just for a couple years at that point. And like I said, I had started stand-up because I had messed a lot of things up and I thought I found my calling and all this. And then I went to Harmony, and partially because I was about ready to do a tour of the Midwest and I was hitting it really hard. And I had this premonition of, I'm not going to make it out of Iowa alive. It was tough. So I went in to Harmony, and so I get there and I think I'm like, you know, this international man of mystery, you know, intrigue. I'm going to be. And I go there, and like the second day I'm there, they watch me for like a day and a half, and they go, the counselor calls me into his office. He goes, you're now on joke restriction. And I was like, what does that even mean? You know? And he goes, for the remainder of your stay with us, you will not be allowed to tell any jokes.
Oh.
And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, that seems to be your biggest coping mechanism. So we're going to take that away from you for a while and see how that goes. And I got to tell you, man, that was harder than kicking booze or drugs or anything else. Because when you're in treatment with like 30 other bozos, believe me, things come up upon which you would like to be able to comment.
Yes.
So
can I tell you, I just felt like this burn go through my whole body. Like, how am I going to get this burn?
Yeah.
How am I going to get the burn out of my body?
Well, what was funny was I did this thing where, you know, things would happen and everybody would look at me and I would just go, huh?
So you got you learned to express just with a little.
I would just go, huh. That's all I could do. And that's actually, when I got back in the working world, that's helped, when your boss says something stupid and you just go, huh. Instead of making a joke. And I remember when I got my chip at the end of my time up there, when I went up they announced my name and everybody went, huh.
That was
it was great. But that was an interesting exercise to not be able to, and it was so true. And another thing that happened when I was up there is about your 4th day in treatment, they have you tell your story, And so I told my story and they made me do it again, which they never made anybody else do. And I was mortified because I wanted to get a smiley face in treatment.
Yeah.
And I was like, why do I have to do it again? And they go, man, when you tell your story, it's like you're talking about somebody else.
Oh.
You are so detached from your own emotional reality.
Uh-huh.
We need you to get a little connected there. And I thought that was so true because I'm really cerebral. It's really a lot in the brain. And they talk in recovery circles sometimes about making the 18-inch drop, from your brain to your heart and getting in touch with what's really going on. Because one of my coping mechanisms was just denial, I'm just going to deny that stuff or make a joke about it.
Or disassociate,
do all that stuff. Going back to, possibly even when my parents got divorced when I was a kid, that was my first, if you're going to talk about trauma, that was the first trauma that I remember. And it's not the worst trauma in the world. A lot of people go through that, but I've learned to not try to compare the traumas,
That's right.
It's good to have, I try to have perspective and recognize, but we're allowed to feel something about the things that deeply impacted us.
Yeah.
So I don't have to get into a comparison game with other people's things. But that was my first trauma. I'd been very close to my father, and then he was he was gone, and then we moved to Germany for a couple of years, so I really didn't get to see him for a while. And
you moved to Germany with your mom?
With my mom, yeah. She taught for the Department of Defense school, so in 6th and 7th grade, we lived over there.
Wow, so you also were way outside of your culture, your friends. You lost a lot.
A lot going on there, yes, a lot of loss. And that's, I first experimented with hash over there. That was the first time I really kind of altered my mind, which I really liked. And then when we came back when I was 13, the first time I ever got drunk, my cousin and I were bartending for a party of my mom's, right? Which tells you a little something about our family. We're mixing up the drinks.
Yeah, the kids are the bartenders.
This is like, 1971 or something, and I was watching all these adults, and I had probably maybe had a half a beer or something at some point in my life before that, but I was watching all these adults get drunk, and I was like, I want to see what that's like. So again, see if this sounds alcoholic. Instead of like just having a few mixed drinks or, doing that, I took 8 slugs out of 8 different bottles of hard booze.
Whoa.
And that was fun for about 3 minutes.
Oh, man.
And then they had to wrestle me up to my room, and I got the spins, and I threw up everywhere, and I was spinning all night. I woke up the next day with a horrific hangover, and I couldn't wait to try it again.
Wow.
That's the weird thing about drunks. It's like most people presented with that set of circumstances. Like my cousin who I was with that night, he did his experiment with alcohol later that year, and he was he just drank some drinks and stuff, but he had like 6 or 7 drinks and got real drunk and threw up and and he told me, I got drunk and I had the spins and I threw up and had a terrible hangover. And I go, wasn't it great? That wasn't fun. And I don't think he's been drunk again in his life. He's a pretty straight guy.
It's just like, I don't want to be that. Like, I don't want to feel like that.
Why would I do that?
Yeah. I want to talk about this concept of what is an alcoholic, because one of my friends and I were just talking about this because she has somebody in her life that she is in love with, who self-medicates with alcohol and cocaine. And she's like, but he's not an alcoholic. And because she differentiates it with a chemical dependency versus psychological. And I'm like, wait, I don't know. Is that even differentiated? Because I don't know.
Yeah. It's funny because there are many opinions on this. I mean, there are opinions as to the American Medical Association calls alcoholism a disease. There are people that say it doesn't fit the disease concept. There's a lot of controversy about it.
Yeah.
To me, and we touched on this earlier, when I take alcohol into my system, I can't consistently and accurately predict what's going to happen. I might have 5 or 6 beers and call it a night, or I might end up somewhere else a couple of days later. I can't predict. And in the big book, it says, if when you honestly want to, you can't quit, or if when you start, you can't stop, you might be an alcoholic.
Okay.
And
and again, not that we need to we don't need to I think it is, like you said, it's up to the individual to know whether they're powerless over alcohol.
Yeah.
And, but
there's a lot of people that ask that, they have asked that question when they come in. They go, well, my life's going kind of shitty, and I can't seem to hold a relationship or a job or anything. Does the alcohol have something to do with it? And it's a self-diagnosed disease. Mostly, sometimes judges will diagnose you. They'll say, okay, I sentence you to 30 days, go to this many AA meetings or whatever, for better or for worse. So it's pretty much self-diagnosed, but there was a woman named Marty Mann who was one of the early women in AA that got sober, and she was friends with Bill Wilson. And she developed what I think is the acid test for people that really are unsure if they're alcoholic or not. Okay. And it's funny because in the big book, it says, if you're not sure, go try some controlled drinking, start and stop, do all this. And, there's a famous place called York Street down in Denver, which has been there forever. It's an AA clubhouse. And those grizzled old timers will go, I'll take you down to Colfax and buy you drinks. If you're not sure. I mean, I don't feel comfortable telling people that, but it's in the book. But Marty Mann developed this test, which I think is the absolute acid test. And her test is for 30 days, drink 2 drinks, no more and no less.
Wow.
And if you can do that successfully, you're probably not an alcoholic.
Oh, then I guess my dad wasn't an alcoholic.
Well, depends. And the thing about that is because mostly if you're an alcoholic, if you won't be able to stop at that second drink. And anybody can white knuckle it for a month. If you don't put any alcohol in your system, most people could just, not drink for a month if they have no alcohol in their system, but put 2 in your body, and to be able to stop, then, most likely, and there's always exceptions to the rules.
Yeah.
We talk in the program, we talk about, we have the fierce double whammy of, a mental obsession that things are going to be different, and the phenomenon of craving, which is what occurs after you take the first drink. What it does is once the alcohol's in your system, our brain chemistry seems to be somewhat different than normal drinkers.
Yeah.
And it creates essentially what's an opiate reaction, which is then you've got to have more, and that's what people can never understand. I can remember hanging around with a friend years ago, and we'd worked on the road together, and then he came here and we were hanging around at the Cricket on the Hill, years ago. And I got out of control. And the next day he goes, man, you were okay till you started doing the shots. And then it was, then it was crazy.
And your brain is just saying more, more, more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't relate to that. I hate nausea. I don't, if I have more than 2 drinks, I don't like that feeling, and I don't want it. And I really don't. And, I had the same with cigarettes. I didn't understand people smoking cigarettes. I threw up after smoking my first cigarette when I was 12, and I was like, I don't want that ever again. Yeah. So, I did smoke a lot in utero. Yeah. So I got that going for me, but I don't know. It's interesting. So there is a chemical or a brain or a neuronal or something.
There is something that seems to be different in the brain chemistry of drunks than normal drinkers.
So that, go ahead.
I was just going to go on to say, and denial is prevalent.
Yeah.
People can convince themselves a lot of things. I got busted for pot the first year of my junior year in high school. I got my first DUI September my senior year in high school.
Wow.
By the time I was 25 or 26, I'd had 3 or 4 DUIs. And at some point, I had kind of a come to Jesus meeting with myself after the 3rd DUI. And I was like, George, you have got to get rid of this car. This thing is really causing you some problems. So let's get rid of that. And I'm being a little bit glib, but I kind of did that. I just didn't have a car for a while. And then I managed to still get thrown in jail a couple times, even though I wasn't even though I wasn't drinking,
Yeah.
I got thrown in jail on acid one time when I was
really?
19 or 20. Yeah.
Wow.
And that was not pleasant.
I can't imagine. I've never done acid. I've done, psilocybin and MDMA, but just with a therapist. Although on psilocybin, I have done solo travels. But yeah, I haven't done acid because acid, I heard, takes you on a long ride. Like you can't get off. You can't psilocybin's like what, 2 hours at peaks and you're done.
It was a long ride, and we've been drinking a lot too. I actually had a house with some friends in Cherry Creek back before it was what it is now. They were actually, it was just kind of
back when it was a creek.
It was like a middle class neighborhood. Yeah. And we had a house back in the late 70s, and we were drinking at the Cherry Cricket down there, and took acid and drank. And then I stumbled home, and I thought there was a shop down there. And for some reason in my addled mind, I thought that's where I lived, so I was trying to get in. I was pounding on the door, and I splintered the door, and it set off the burglar alarm. So the cops came, and now I'm tripping in the back of a cruiser. And I'll never forget this. There was a Latina policewoman who had dyed her hair red, but kind of neglected the maintenance of that,
Okay.
So she just had this,
she had a
red stripe down the back of her head, which when that was, now that would be commonplace, but that was,
before it was cool. She started the trend.
Never seen that before. And I was just tripping, looking at her head. And I said, why in the world did you dye your hair red? Like, did you think we wouldn't know? And the guy driving the car pulled over. He goes, you say one more, we're going to beat the shit out of you. I said, gotcha. So I went down there, but the point of the story is my first amends happened around that, because this is just totally white privilege today. They put me in the felons bin. I'd been in the drunk tank before, which is just that's just a bunch of goofballs, but they put me in the felons bin because they thought I was trying to break into this place. And that's a little scarier clientele.
Yeah.
Yes. So the next morning, the detective goes, what's the deal here? You don't have any, you've got some, you don't have any serious crimes. You don't have any property crimes, what's going on? And I didn't tell him I'd been tripping, but I said, I was just really drunk and I don't really know what happened, to tell you the truth. He goes, well, I'm going to call the owner of this place. And if you agree to make restitution, we'll see if they'll drop the charges. And I said, okay. And so it turned out to be this woman, Carolyn Finneran. I still remember her name. And because this shop was like a woman's clothing shop that I was pounding on.
Yeah.
And so he talked to her, and she said, I will agree to drop charges, but he has to come and talk to me himself.
There you go.
And I was like, okay. And so I went to her, and how old was I then? I was 20 years old. And I went to her and I said, I'm the guy that, pounded your door. And she goes, well, I just wanted to meet you. And I said, and I will make restitution, and I'm very sorry I put you through this. And, is there anything else? I didn't realize that years later I'd be doing more amends like that. But that was the first time.
Foreshadowing.
It was foreshadowing. And then we became friends, and I used to buy my mom's Christmas present there every year for like 15 years.
Aww.
And then maybe longer than that, because I got sober. I was in and out of the program for a number of years, and then I got sober this time when I was 35. And I remember going in there maybe when I was 36, and I bought a present for my mom, and she said, how are you doing? I said, I've been sober for a while,
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it was kind of a wild story there.
Yeah. I love the redemption, or I don't know if that's the word, but just that resilience, because I have a good friend whose son just got out of rehab and then relapsed, and it's heartbreaking.
Well, she said to me, I have a son, and I would like to think if he made a mistake, somebody would cut him some slack. Oh, again, it was grace.
Yeah.
It was and to me, one of the biggest spiritual principles is the ability to cut ourselves and other people some slack.
Yeah.
To not expect perfection from everybody,
that's something, man.
To just go, oh yeah, you made a mistake, and that as a parent, when we get to practice that a lot.
I know.
And
I make amends to my son a lot, because I have a pattern of, I was taught with shame. And then when I hear my mom's voice, it's like, it's not a nice correction. It's not like, oh, hey, by the way, once again, I'm asking you to honor your word here. But there's this shame energy that I throw at him sometimes, that luckily he has a lot of Teflon to that. It doesn't seem to like crumple him, but I just feel terrible, and I have to own it. And
I love all the Brene Brown stuff. Are you familiar with Brene Brown?
Yeah,
She
in
does
fact,
a lot of groundbreaking work on guilt and shame, and
Yeah.
She talks about guilt is the idea that you did a shitty thing, and shame is the idea that you are shitty, and the huge difference between those things. And I had a therapist years ago. I could remember feeling guilty about stuff. And he said to me, guilt is a bullshit emotion. He goes, own what you do, man. He goes, you do it or don't do it, but don't feel guilty about it. And I thought that was an interesting concept. It's like, if you're going to do it. And I will tell you, I'm sorry, I'm going to launch on something here.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
In doing the work of the program, we do a fear inventory. In addition to doing that, resentment list, and then, people we've harmed and all that stuff, we do a fear inventory. And so at the beginning, that was fairly superficial stuff. Like, I'm not going to have enough money for rent. I'm not going to have enough gigs. It was that kind of thing. Over the years, you get down to the existential fears, which for me are, I'm incompetent and worthy and unlovable. That's the existential stuff for me.
Yeah.
And I mask that pretty well. The way I mask it is with ego and arrogance and false bravado. Right. It doesn't manifest that way for everybody, but for me, that's how I do it. I don't even know I'm doing it, but that's what happens, because I've got this,
your false self,
this tower of jello on the inside. That's just this wounded 5-year-old child. And then I make up for it by, putting on the big front. I find that that's interesting when we go through the work of figuring that out,
Yeah. That I always picture scaffolding, like my recovery work is like scaffolding holding me up while I deconstruct my foundation.
Yes.
That tower of jello. What a great analogy. And I remember you saying this to me once. You're like, comedians are the most arrogant, insecure people on earth. And I do think there's something to that. I mean, I do feel, but also there's something in us that, because we chose comedy over other things, that there is a part of us. For me, it feels like a healing energy.
Yes.
That it transmutes. That's the whole point of this Traumedy podcast, taking the dark and then bringing it up into the light.
Yes.
And kind of transmuting it into something manageable, but also actually something fun. And I was thinking about, I wanted to go back just to when you used to do that bit about driving while you're stoned.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember that one?
Yes.
You got pulled over.
I got pulled over on I-25. A friend of mine was driving. We were in high school, and we got pulled over on I-25 for going 4 miles an hour. And he thought he was getting popped for speeding. He's like, all right, everybody maintain, man. And the cop comes up. He's just laughing. He's like, you have any idea how fast you were going, son? And the guy goes, no. And he holds up like 4 fingers. How about this many? He goes, let's put it this way, son. I'm a mounted patrol. And I had to slow down to pull you over. So, but comedy.
What was the one about? I know I wasn't swerving.
Oh yeah, I got a DUI. Yeah, and I know I wasn't swerving because I was using the curb as a guide, which unfortunately is a true story.
You have so many. You have a lot of traumedy around your DUIs.
Well, yeah, and the thing, and I love your concept for the whole podcast here of healing some of this trauma with comedy, but also I can, as I demonstrated in, being put on joke restriction, I can even, do that in a way that doesn't totally serve me. And also I have to realize, that the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said a joke is an epitaph of an emotion. Meaning epitaph being what they put on your tombstone, So the idea that sometimes, there's a joke, but there's always there's an emotion in there somewhere,
That's right.
And
it's funny because it's true.
And it's funny in AA because AA is like hanging around with comedians, because we have pretty dark sense of humor, it actually, sometimes it's funny because sometimes someone will bring a loved one to an open meeting, and it'll be some guy sharing like, and then I tried to hang myself, but the rope broke and my fall was broken by a pile of conference approved literature, and so everybody is laughing their asses off. And this guy's somebody's relatives just looking at, their eyes are real big.
Yeah. You can't joke about stuff like
crazy.
Yeah.
But,
that dark sense of humor. Well, with nurses and police officers, firefighters, I often do my Power of Humor talk with them, because gallows humor, especially with nurses, they feel ashamed of the dark humor and the gallows humor because there's just something, we're supposed to be the healers and always taking care of everybody. But then you go in the back room and laugh about something that some patient maybe
Oh, yeah.
did or went through, but that is absolutely necessary. And what I want to say though, I am not sure I get the joke restriction thing. However, like my therapist said, there's a way that it allows you, it drops your defenses. It actually empowers you because you know you have this buoyancy of the humor that you can dive a little deeper because you know you've got a resource. I mean, obviously higher power is the best resource for this kind of thing, but I think humor is a language of higher power too.
No, I hear you, and it may not have been.
It's a balance, right? It's not like
they could have said 2 weeks or something, and I said, then I get to be funny. You know?
Yeah, but no, I understand though. If you're doing it constantly, where you're not letting yourself go deeper, and you're using it as a static.
Well, I want to tell you one of my favorite stories, and we're going to get a little heavy here, and then, I suffer from clinical depression for many years, which manifested in some pretty hard times, several suicide attempts. And the most recent one being, that's when I got sober. I mean, this was 30 years ago. And I had about a year and a half of sobriety. And then I had a bad breakup, and I just kind of went to pieces and started drinking again. And I went on like a 10-week bender, did not draw a sober breath. And at the end of that 10 weeks, I got tired of taking the slow train to oblivion, and I wanted to take the fast train. And I drove my car to a garage of a house that my mom owned in Denver. And I had come to, this was on a Thursday morning, and I'd come to still drunk from the night before. And so it's about 8:30 in the morning, and I parked my car and closed the door of the garage and sat there with the motor running for about 15 or 20 minutes. And just as I was about to lose consciousness, a voice came in my head and said, "Don't check out this way."
Wow.
And I got out of the car and kind of rolled around in the dirt. And then, to be honest, I can't remember if it was that day or the next day, but I went back to a meeting I'd been going to in downtown Denver and told them what I'd been doing on my summer vacation.
Yeah.
So my favorite part of the story is this meeting I went to was on 18th and Broadway at the Trinity Methodist Church. And it was a real cross section of people, because you get all these, it was a nooner, and we get all these white collar people. And then there's like 4 halfway houses near there. So you get street people. I mean, you get everybody. And there was this street guy named, who I loved. He was really weird. But he would say this like weirdly transcendent stuff sometimes, if you could listen to it. I came back that day and told him, what I'd been doing. And after the meeting, he comes up to me and he goes, "So I guess that suicide thing didn't work out for you, huh?" And I swear to God, I just laughed. And that was the first time I had laughed in like 10 weeks. And I was like, "No, guess it didn't. But thank you for listening to my story, and thanks for the pep talk."
Yeah.
But
like you said, transcendent in a way too.
Yes.
Almost like God's voice. Because I do feel that sense of humor from God. That sounds like a God sense of humor.
Yes.
Guess that suicide thing didn't work out for you, huh?
Speaking of God, so like I said, I came to this program that talks about having living by spiritual principles, and there's a lot of God stuff in there that I didn't want any part of. And I still don't understand how it works. I have kind of my sense of God. I just think of God as love, and there's a power of love in the universe. But in the program, in the big book, there's a couple of stories about guys that have these like white light experiences, like Bill Wilson. He's in the hospital, and then he feels the presence of God. He feels like he's on a mountaintop and feels the presence of God. And the doctor comes in and he goes, "Doctor, you're not going to believe this, but God was in this room," and the doctor, nicely enough, says, "If I were you, I'd go with it. This is the 4th time you've been in the hospital here." I mean,
yeah.
And which was cool, because you can imagine this is a psychiatrist. A lot of people go, "Oh, that's really nice, Bill. Why don't you take a couple of these pills, calm down, and we'll talk tomorrow." So there's a couple of stories like that. And so they wrote in the back of the big book, they have this thing called, it's the appendix on spiritual experience, which occurs after the first printing of the big book. And they write this and they say, "We wrote this because we want you to know that not everybody has a white light experience like that. We don't want to give the idea that that has to be like that.
Yeah.
It's like many people have what they call a spiritual experience of the educational variety, which occurs, over time, and you may not have this big epiphany like that." So in my case, for many years, I thought, okay, well, that's what I've had over the years. I've had a spiritual experience of the educational variety. You know, I've never had a white light experience or anything like that. And then just about 5 or 6 years ago, I was thinking, and I was like, well, what was it when you were in that car with the motor running, determined to kill yourself, and that voice said, don't check out this way?
I have goosebumps. See, I get spiritual signs.
Well, and I know, cynical scientists among you might say that was just a collection of biochemical tissues and electromagnetic impulses trying not to lose their host. So
there's that.
That's one that's one possibility, but I choose to see some divinity in it, that my time wasn't done, and I received that gift, and they're both equally plausible, but I feel that, that, and it's funny how your idea changes after, I was sober over 20 years before I even was willing to look at that event differently.
And also just love when things come through with a kind of a, the feeling of the aha moment of that. So, of course, man, I just want you to know, I do get these confirmations from spirit that come to me as goosebumps. And I just got goosebumps when you said that. And I have a neighbor that lives across the street who's total scientist, and it actually agitates him when I talk about my spiritual experiences. He's like, like you said, the way you described a scientist describing something. And that's okay. Like he can have his reality. I can have mine. We can coexist. I happen to get a lot of signs from spirit. And I am not exaggerating. On my 12th step, when I was reading the paragraph that said, as a result of working these steps, you may have a spiritual awakening. And I was laying in the hammock in my backyard, and a hawk just came swooping right over me. And I got goosebumps all over, and I knew. And from then on, I still get these signs from hawks that tell me when I'm having I can't explain it, George.
We can interpret things how we want. I choose to see the divinity in things. I was walking on my walk a year or two ago, and there was this dragonfly that was just flying in front of me for what seemed like a mile, but it probably wasn't that long. But I was just like, I feel like not alone in the universe, just because there's this little dragonfly, stuff like that. And I wanted to, I don't know how much time we got left, but I want to,
as much as we want.
Well, because I have 2 epiphany stories that I like those aha moments.
And let me tell you, I love it.
So the first one, I was about 7 years sober, and I had the unbridled joy of being married and divorced in the program at that point. And so I had this little 1-bedroom condo, and I love this place. It had this nice big balcony, had an indoor pool and underground parking, and it was very modest, but I loved it, And I was 7 years sober, and I was sponsoring several guys, and I went to like 9 meetings a week, and I felt really, in the flow of life and everything. So I come down one day to take a walk. There's all these mansions. So I come down to take a walk around the neighborhood, and I'm walking down the street, and I'm feeling bathed in God's love, I'm so wonderful. And I walk down the street, and I go, there's that. I go, there's Teddy White's house. There's a guy I went to grade school and high school. I keep looking at it, and I keep walking. I go, it's a big fucking house. I don't have a big house. I have a 1-bedroom condo. I just start chewing on it.
Yeah. Start comparing.
How come he's got that big house? And then, and I'm like, God damn it, I'm smarter than Teddy White, and it's not even true. Like he went to Yale and NYU law school. It's not even true, but that's the story I tell myself to rile myself up, not even true. And so I'm walking around Cheeseman Park there, and I'm just chewing. How come he's got that goddamn house? It's just a comparison game. And then I had one of the biggest epiphanies ever in my life, like a lightning bolt. This voice said to me, the universe has not fucked you over. And it was like, by any stretch of the imagination, you've been given more gifts than 99% of people on the planet. You have your health. You're sober now. You live in this beautiful city, in this beautiful state. And then we talk about doing gratitude lists in AA sometimes. I don't think I'd ever done one. And just in my head, this gratitude list came through of like all the people I'd known, the people I loved, the books I'd read, the music I'd heard, the movies I'd seen, the interact. It just came flooding into my consciousness.
Yeah.
Of like, the universe has not fucked you over. But sometimes we have that thought.
I feel like that's your book.
Yeah.
The universe has not fucked you over.
And then the other thing was, and I keep walking and I go, and furthermore, you like Teddy White. Yeah. You're like, you've been friends since you were kindergarten. He's never said an unkind word to you in his entire life. Why is his success somehow detrimental to your happiness?
Yeah.
And there's that old saying, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes, it is.
It's like, why does it even matter? And that was a huge epiphany in my outlook on life and how we relate to other people. And I don't have to get in, and I still do it sometimes.
I know.
I mean,
and that's the curse and blessing of the reach of Facebook and Instagram. And why are they getting 5,000 likes and I have 15? And it is that, I call it compare-itis.
One more epiphany.
Yeah.
This actually happened when I was just like 6 months sober, and I was headlining the Comedy Works in Tampa.
Oh, I remember. Yes.
And it wasn't going great. and I was 6 months sober, and I'd hit a pretty hard bottom, as I talked about before. But so I was trying to do the work, but it that spiritual thing hadn't kicked in yet. And I didn't have my anesthesia anymore, and I'm on the road and all this stuff, and I'm not having great shows. I mean, it was hard. And so I went to a meeting at noon, and on the way to the meeting, I was playing this game that a lot of alcoholics in early sobriety play, which is, what would I allow myself to drink over? What if my dad was terminally ill, or what if I was sick, or what if, what if this happened or that happened? Would I let myself drink? And just playing that silly game in my head. So I go to this meeting, and there's this young man there who's like mid-20s, and he shares in the meeting, and he says, I'm terminally ill with AIDS, and a lot of my friends say, why do you keep going to those meetings, man? Why don't you just drink as much as you can and take as many drugs as you can and have sex with as many people as you can and just be like a Viking funeral, just light that boat on fire and float it out into the harbor, And he said, I don't do that because I am going to die soon. And I want to be emotionally present for every moment I have left on this planet.
Mm.
And that was such a profound effect on me, because that's when I began to understand that sobriety is the gift. Always before, I had looked at it as some sort of deprivation.
What am I?
I was
yes.
like, what am I? How come I can't drink mimosas? I never did, but how come
how
come I can't take acid on Wednesdays? How come I can't do all this stuff? And what I came to understand is sobriety was the gift, and the only thing I was being deprived of was killing myself slowly.
Yeah.
So that was that affected my recovery to this day.
And you know what else? You are one of the people who recommended The Power of Now to me, the book by Eckhart Tolle. I wanted to talk about what you just said, which was, I'm only depriving myself of killing myself slowly, but I would say I'm only depriving myself of my life because the joy is being present.
Yeah.
And in this moment, not in the future, not in the past, and certainly not dissociated with alcohol where we're distanced and way buried inside.
No, absolutely.
So we're the gift of being in the present, and people who value this present moment and this connection that is real.
Yes.
This is the joy in life.
And I would like to expand on that a lot of the stuff, and I listen to a lot of Eckhart Tolle talks and everything, and I know he's kind of pop psychology these days, but I love him. And he teaches a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's from the Buddhist tradition, a lot of it's from various places.
He draws from Christianity as well.
He draws from everything.
He's eclectic.
But he talks about the ego, and he says the ego's main job is to perpetuate itself, and the way it does that is by separating you out from everybody else. And the way it does that is by trying to make you feel greater than or less than, rather than, approximately equal to. That the ego does all its work in the past and the future. Yeah. It's either ruminating about some slight in the past, or projecting about some, an event that hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah.
That's the way, and it produces fear. Fear is the primary tool of the ego. So those things produce fear. In the present moment, the ego can gain no traction.
Yeah.
When you're in the present moment, it can't run those numbers on you.
Yeah. I always think of it like a binary code, like 0-1, like it's threat, no threat, threat, no threat. For me, like I just, and then ruminating in the past for me is like preparing for the threat in the future. Yeah. So I gotta be ready. Like I'm going to this HOA meeting and I'm already like othering them, like instead of, like you said, the oneness. And
well, one of my favorite things that Eckhart says is anything we accept fully can lead us to peace.
Mm-hmm.
That idea of getting out of denial and getting into let's just accept what really is at this moment. Now we can change it. What we can change is primarily our attitude about things, but we can influence things and we can try to change it. But and a lot of that helps, and we've talked about this too, is prayer and meditation, helps with some of this stuff for me. And I'm not very disciplined at it all, to be honest, but I saw this wonderful animated video on meditation by this guy named Dan Harris. He was an anchor for ABC News, and he wrote a wonderful book called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics, which is a wonderful title.
Yeah.
But in this little animated video, he says meditation is a radical act that can free you from a lifetime of wandering around in a fog of rumination and projection.
Say it one more time.
Meditation is a radical act that can free you from a lifetime of wandering around in a fog of rumination and projection.
Mm.
And what I love about that is too, so again, for me, the rumination, they didn't sufficiently recognize my genius at some point in the past. So I'm going to chew on that. Or the projection of I'm not going to get what I want, or this isn't going to happen out in the future. And I love the word projection because there's a couple different meanings. There's the clinical definition of projection in psychology of, accusing other people of having the stuff that you yourself suffer from, but there's also, coming from the audio video world, there's projection screen. And so when I think about that projection, it's like we throw all our experience and our preconceived notions and everything kind of onto this screen out there as we try to negotiate the world, which actually makes it difficult to witness the true reality which lies on the other side of the screen.
Yeah.
So when we can kind of clean that off a little bit and let go of some of those projections and ruminations, then we might have a better idea of seeing the ultimate truth.
Yes. Thank you. And being curious, like that, I'm just going to project onto you. And that way it's almost like visually, psychologically jamming the signals where there is no room for you to come through.
Yeah.
So how do I really be present in this, being present in this conversation, hearing each other?
And that happens in so many interactions with people, and you can feel it sometimes. You just go, oh yeah, you're putting all that stuff on, it's like, I'm sorry, and again, to come back to compassion, and just to be compassionate for everybody is always my job, is to summon up some love in my heart to meet any situation. That's the goal, to try to do that. And it's difficult sometimes because we have our own stuff that we carry around, and I always say, in AA, it says we're not cured of alcoholism. What we have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Yeah. And I always say, the thing is, I'm one fear away from being in unfit spiritual condition, and I don't know which one it's going to be. I might be able to handle 4, and then the universe sends me 7. And then I might act out in weird ways that don't serve me or anybody else very well. And that can still happen today.
Yeah. And it's good when we can recognize those variables.
Yeah.
For me, the really core, simple, enough sleep, eat well,
Yeah.
Exercise, meditate. If I do those 4 things, everything else seems to take care of itself.
Well, that's an old recovery thing. They talk about HALT, which is, don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Yeah.
And then I have one called SPLAT, which is don't get too self-centered, paranoid, lonely, angry, or tired. Or you might go SPLAT.
Yes.
So, and then we always have all these acronyms for fear. And my favorite acronym for fear is forget every acronym, right?
There it is. The bookends on Traumedy. I love that. The satire within the wisdom. And it is. This is the thing, the wisdom to know the difference. This hit me just recently that the same behavior might be wise in the past or at a different time. It's situational. And it is a daily, is it wise today? Those survival traits that we learn about that were served us at some point that were wise then, now they're not. And
I hear that people talk about that in meetings sometimes, like, alcohol got me through hard shit at various times.
That's right.
That actually helped me to not kill myself at various times.
That's right.
So it's like that was different then, and then it didn't serve me.
That's it.
Because I was overserved.
Well, I think that we have served an adequate amount of trauma with Traumedy.
Have we protected, though? Did we serve and protect, or we just, that's not our job, I guess.
That isn't. No,
We're just serving.
I don't have the badge, but you do have the right to remain silent. But I don't.
I don't have the ability to remain silent. That's the Ron White joke.
Yeah. And anyway, we could do this all day. I hope, let's do a regular. Will you be a regular?
I'd love to be a regular.
That'd be fun. So I'll have you back to help me traumatize. Traumatize. I've
been traumatized.
Thank you, George X,
for
sharing your experience, strength, and hope.
Thank you, Nancy. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Peace ouch.
Peace ouch. That's my safe word, by the way. Ouch.
Yes. That is a great joke. I'd like to thank my guest, George X, and thank you for tuning in to Traumedy. Thank you, Nathaniel Norton, for putting together the music for Traumedy. And again, let me know if you have any questions or any topics you'd like to have covered, or clarifications or corrections. I'm open to all that kind of feedback. I'm Nancy Norton. You can reach out to me at my website, www.nancynorton.tv. Okay, thanks for listening. Have a great week. And remember, take your trauma, take your pain, and play with it.